100,000 children have been displaced. Well, joining me live now is Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Always great to see you. I want to first ask you about these arrest warrants issued by the ICC. We heard the UK, among several nations, saying that they would honor those if he were to travel to their country. What does this all say now for Israel and for the Prime Minister?
Good evening, Carl. Well, it shows that there is creeping pressure from the international community on the way that the government of Israel has conducted the war in the Gaza Strip. This is one of the few ways that the international community is able to make its views known via the ICC. Strictly speaking, of course, because Israel and the United States are not party, it's not going to have a strong impact on him domestically, not at all, of course. And indeed, his popularity may raise a little bit because he is seen to be the victim of a worldwide anti-Semitic behavior he has charged. But it is a reaction to the way that the war has been conducted and the high level of death and destruction. One of the challenges for Israel increasingly will be the fact that they have kept out non-involved observers, journalists, and others who can see exactly what is going on the ground, how much of the damage has been done, is aid getting in. That could help them make their case that there have not been crimes against humanity or violations of international humanitarian law. But if he travels, many countries are going to have to make that hard choice. Do they stand by this court, as they have said, or are they only supporting the court's work when it doesn't cost them anything? So this is the challenge for the rest of the world.
You know, we heard some optimistic words, actually, about a potential ceasefire in Lebanon, those coming from a top U.S. official, Amos Hochstein, who's there in the region trying to broker this deal. What are your thoughts on that? Is this really the last good chance, you think, before Donald Trump takes office to get a peace deal signed between Israel and Hezbollah?
Yeah, it may well be, but the reality is that it's not going to be the last chance, even if it does not work. There are many reasons to be hopeful. Mr. Netanyahu said his goal is to get residents back into the north of Israel. He cannot do it, even with the devastating impact their war in Lebanon and, of course, the attacks on the communication devices have had. They've really struck hard against Hezbollah. But Hezbollah proves on the daily basis that they can still fire rockets into the north of Israel. So that goal cannot be met, unlikely to be met, unless there is a ceasefire. So if the pressure is strong, it may happen under the Biden administration. And if not, it most likely will happen under a Trump administration.
You know, we've seen the U.S. working hard for these deals in terms of ceasefires on the ground, but then we also saw the U.S. vetoing for the fourth time a UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza because it didn't directly link that ceasefire to the release of hostages. When it comes to the UN, do you think the U.S. is potentially taking too hard of a line when it comes to the wording of these ceasefire resolutions?
I believe that many would argue that this last veto was extraordinary and deeply unfortunate. Certainly, the Palestinian representative spoke what many people think, that a ceasefire will not solve everything, but it is the first step to solving anything. And that quote is one that resonates with many. This could be, again, President Biden feels very strongly in support of Israel, and in spite of his frustrations with the prime minister, even in support of the prime minister. And this was his last statement that the U.S. is standing with Israel, right or wrong. But it does undermine the United Nations when you've got a 14-1 vote. It does make clear that the normal paths to having the international community have a voice are not available. Nonetheless, all of the resolutions that have been passed before have not made an impact on the ground.
Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Ambassador, thank you as always.
My pleasure.